Welcome to Naked with Dr. Money. I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, and so happy you're joining me for another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. As you know, Naked with Dr. Money is my opportunity to share with you kind of the backstory of how I maintain my mind, body, and soul, and connecting with others who are involved with maintaining their mind, body, and soul. And in particular, we talk about mindset usually around this conversation. So, as you know, I'll always ask my guests, what do they think about their mindset? When did they first believe that they had a mindset? And is their mindset the result of nature, nurture, or a little bit of both? And then how they've utilized their mindset as it relates to motivate them in terms of the actions that they've taken along their journey. And more importantly, what type of manifestations have they been able to realize? I think you're going to enjoy my guest today. I know I did. We were met and we were introduced and became fast friends. We had so much to talk about. Miss Laura James hails from Boston. So for those of you out there in Boston, hey, what's up? I enjoyed my time visiting Boston and I have dear friends from Boston. So again, that could explain why we became fast friends upon that introduction. But just like me, she's an entrepreneur. She's currently in the process as a co founder of launching a new venture that deals with hiring and matching. It's a job site board. So we'll learn a lot more about that. But her background, she's been a 20-year expert digital marketer, graduate of Harvard. Hey, shout out to the HBCUs, and a mom. She has an adult son. I can relate. I have an adult son, so we know about that journey as well. But she also has a passion to help other Black women founders. And so she coaches them and guides them along the capital and formation pipeline of helping them understand how to interact with not only angels, VCs, how to secure grants where they are appropriate for the particular venture, and even more. So, without any further ado, I am going to welcome Laura to this conversation with me today. Hi, lady.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. And how are you today?
I am so good today. Today is a good day.
I, I love it when it's a good day, right? Extra energy, all of
Yes,
those things. Yeah.
yes, and we're halfway through the day, so
Oh my
I will imagine it's going to continue to be a great day today.
Absolutely. I've been setting the intention. I've kind of come up with this, thing where I've been saying, hey, before I even step out of bed, like take a moment and set the intention for the day. And it's amazing that on the days that I am really deliberate and I do that, it seems like the day takes off in a very positive way. So I've been encouraging everyone to take a moment. First, think of yourself. So think of yourself and send yourself a big hug and love and so into yourself. So it's like I imagine that I'm giving myself a big hug and I tell myself that you're whole, perfect, and complete as the Almighty and the ancestors made you, right? So that's the hug for me. And then I'll think about immediate family. Some mornings I'll think about my son and I'm just sending him a virtual hug. And it's amazing because oftentimes he'll end up calling me or texting me, hey mom, I love you. It's like, and so it's really a power. I think it's powerful to set
I
your
love that.
intention.
I love that idea. I'll definitely have to start doing that. I do morning affirmations for myself as well, giving myself some encouragement, definitely setting up the day in terms of planning and phone calls and getting notes ready. So I do a little of that, but I think I'm going to start incorporating some other people in that as well. Virtual
Absolutely. I think it's the best gift we can give to our loved ones. See, a lot of times I think, I remember I was uh you know as a single mom, there were times that I would be frustrated sometimes with my son's father or whatever. And I'm sure vice versa, right? But I realized, I said, what we really could do for one another is to pray for one another.
Mhm.
Because typically it's about something either, in what's happening in business or life or logistics or whatever, and everybody's juggling a lot instead of being mad at that person and kind of having your frustration with them, if you could imagine them from a loving standpoint and send them love, send them a prayer for wellness, something in that regard, I think it produces better outcomes. So it's kind of my idea
No,
of
I like that as well, because sometimes our prayer can be very selfish and self-centered.
yeah.
And I think if you give them that energy, the energy that you want back, especially with, I'm a single mom as well. I have a baby daddy as well. And that's a good point that
Yes,
we have to
yes.
like send it up so we can get it back for sure.
Yes, yes, and it's true,
Yeah.
and so I've become real familiar that all of these so-called sayings that people used to say, it's a funny thing how they begin to take on real meaning, right? I've come to believe that you sort of reap what you sow, is that it's in that same thing, that if you sow out some good thoughts and some good intentions, then you can reap more of those in terms of results. And I think that that's the problem. In fact, that's part of what I've used to create this whole new healing homes. I'll tell you more about that later. But
Okay.
the conversation with you today, I love to have a conversation around mindset, because in order to accomplish anything along this journey, it's a result of how we interpret information and experiences. And I found that I really can see, sort of the correlation between, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? Because the glass has the same amount of liquid, proverbial liquid in it, but it's about a mindset.
Mhm.
So, when do you believe that you first recognized that you had a mindset? And it's a loaded question. So that's number one. And
Okay.
part two of that is, do you believe that it was part of your nature, or how it was you were nurtured, or a little bit of both?
Hmm. That's a great question. I would say it's a little bit of both. I think that I come from a large family. I'm number 11, so I have 10 siblings.
Wow.
Um, and I have a twin brother. So that nurturing, that experience growing up with so many different personalities and so many different people. I mean, at one time growing up, we had 13 people living all in the same house. I mean, it was a big house, but it was still a lot of people too. But I believe that I developed patience and understanding and recognizing that it's not all about you. Like it was never, when you're a twin, it's never just about you. You always have like another person that you have to consider, that you think alike. But also just understanding that you have to make your place when there's so many people that are vying for the attention of my mother. She was a single parent as well, vying for just a seat at the table, just to have a voice. I nurtured, it was part of my nurturing, but I definitely developed my mindset at that point that I would be heard regardless of the number of people in the room, and that I would be seen, I would be respected, I would be admired and celebrated. All of those things came into play. That went into my professional life and when I worked for companies, but also now that I'm running my own company and launching my own business, I still ask for those same things. I still ask for those same elements in my life. So I believe that it was a little bit of both. Maybe it developed and came really strong growing up in such an environment, but certainly you have to demand those same respects and those same elements in every aspect of your life.
Well, it's interesting because I experience you as also, your your tone is nice and pleasant and very sweet. I come from the world of, I was in advertising before it was a popular thing to be, and then I went into real estate development and construction, right? So commercial development and construction, right? So I had to learn how to be a little more, like I learned a whole new vocabulary, and I think every sector has its own vocabulary.
Yeah, for sure.
And I noticed that, as my son says, that I have a very strong
I
command.
agree. I agree. I totally agree with that. From minute one, I was like, okay.
And so I'm working sometimes, like I would always say, listen, I start off trying to bring honey, but I have a bucket of vinegar too. So
You got to do what works for you.
if the honey is not working, vinegar is right here.
That's right. That's right.
So how, you know, with your poise and demeanor, how have you managed to maintain, just that presence and still be able to demand, if you say the seat at the table, and make sure that people not only hear you, acknowledge, but respect, give space for what it is you're saying?
So I think where it works for me, and I have a background in radio, number one. So this is a trained voice. It was 4 years at Howard in, doing student run radio, and then into actually professionally working for a radio station. So I think that's where my tone comes in, and my ability to listen a little bit better. But I do believe that it's helpful because although I don't say a lot, what I do say has a lot of impact. So I will listen first all the time. I will assess my answer. So when I do speak, if you've been in journalism, then it's like, say what you have to say in 10 words or less. So when I do speak, and when it is time for me and my voice to be heard, it's something relative. Like, I don't have a lot of fluff words. So I'm kind of direct and straight to the point, but certainly have value and benefit when I do speak. But I'm normally the one that'll listen to the entire room and then I step in. Like, I hear everyone. And I think that helps. I think people want to be heard first. I know that that's a huge part of my consultation with these women founders, is that they want to be heard. And now once we hear you, we have to just make sure that what you're saying makes sense, that it's truthful, and that it's kind. And I think I consider all of those points when I have a conversation. And that's how that's how I'm heard and how I'm respected, because they can expect me to be truthful, be kind. And I forgot the third one just now.
And be truthful, be kind, and what did you say? Be heard.
Be heard. Yes.
Yeah.
Be heard.
So I
Thank
find
you.
that it's an interesting dynamic between speaking to women and speaking to men.
Absolutely.
I've occupied spaces where I'm mostly in the room of men, and I noticed that they'll continue the conversation. Like, if you don't sometimes insert yourself in the conversation, you'll never get into the conversation. And oftentimes you're absolutely correct. I've always had a gift of holding space. I'm a great listener. So I'm listening and I'm taking notes.
No, I know you are. I know you are. You hear me first, for sure. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so you're listening to, and you see the guy that's sitting next to you looking over at your notes, and he's trying to, take liberties with what your points are and then insert those points. And it's like, no, homie, you can author this.
Yes. And in my business as well, I work in a male dominated industry where it is digital marketing, it is technology, it is, working in this like internet space. And you, like you said, you just have to be able to know who your audience is and what you need to say. But yeah, it's very different between men and women. I think that's why I chose women to do this kind of consultation, because one, they need to be heard, and two, like I said, they need the guidance as well. Sometimes men, that cup is already full.
So tell us a little bit about how not only you said your mindset was formed by being both part of family and a twin. Wow, I would have never guessed that. Talk about a fun fact. But you also journeyed. So you left Boston, you went to college in DC, so you attended Howard, and then you made your way to both Los Angeles, and then I know you spent some time in the Bay Area and in Miami. Where else have you kind of trekked, and what were some of the motivations behind those different decisions and experiences?
Right. So, like I said, I grew up in a house of 10 siblings. It was very crowded. And I started my travel journey abroad. So I was an exchange student both my junior year and senior year of high school. So I lived first in Japan, attended school in Japan. It was called the Experiment in International Living, was the first program that I had joined. So I lived with a Japanese family for 6 months. I attended school in Japan. And I was one of the children. So we had chores, we had responsibilities, we had our studies, and then loved the experience so much living in someone else's home, living in a different country, that the following year I did a semester in Spain. And I lived with a family that lived in Barcelona. I went to school, I learned the language. And then I think that was my bug bite when it came down to travel. And I was just like, I am going to see the world, not just the United States, the world. And I've done tons of traveling. And I like to live in places. I don't just like to visit. So I moved my company that was formerly based in the Silicon Valley, East Bay, and I moved it to Miami. So Miami had an initiative where they were really incentivizing companies to make the trek between Silicon Valley and make Miami the new Silicon Valley. So in 2021, that's exactly what I did. So I lived in Miami for several months as I'm setting up the company. But home was always Oakland, California. I lived in California. I lived in LA for 20 years, then moved to East Bay for work and for, it was more techie there and VCs are there and money's there. So that's what got me up to Oakland, California. But I travel between LA and Oakland, and then of course Miami, where the business is based.
You hit on all of my favorite things. So let's go back. So what gave you the courage to want to be an exchange student? And you talk about Japan and then Barcelona. How would you compare just in terms of the different experiences, those cultural, that's what people need now. I wanted to be international, and I'll tell you, I just about had to run away from my family just to move from Oakland to Los Angeles, much less to try to do anything international, right?
Right.
But clearly, you had something that said that not only you could, but you did.
I
So
did.
kind of walk us through some of that.
So initially, the exchange program to Japan was just about seeing what another world looked like. And that was the furthest I could get away at that time, honestly. And then every exchange student gets their own bedroom. And I had never had a room to myself. So I was like, did you say I get my own room? I'm there. It was a really nice room too. It was huge. And the beds are on the floor. So I didn't have like a fancy like girl, the teenager room. But I just said, how far can I go? How long can I stay? And what are the benefits of going? And your own room to yourself, because I have always shared a room with my twin, was incentive enough. But I also wanted to learn the language. Like, it wasn't just going for my own room, but I wanted to learn the language. I was very fascinated with language. So I took Spanish in high school. And again, you learn the language. So part of the program is you immerse yourself in a culture, in a language. So my family did not speak English at all. So I had to learn how to speak Japanese if I wanted to eat or go anywhere. And it's a very strict culture. So you have to ask permission to speak. In my family's home, you had to ask permission to speak. So I had to learn how to say, and I don't remember now, but I had to learn to say in Japanese, can I speak? Which was very different from growing up in Boston, where we would talk over each other. But in that culture, it's it's different for women than men. So I walked behind the father or the head of the family. And you asked, could you speak? And I think that's what given me a lot of my patience now when it comes down to talking is having to hold your tongue and having to listen first, find the proper time to interject, and then you would do that if you were given permission.
Wow.
Yeah. So then Spain, the next year, I was in AP Spanish. Our whole senior class our senior class, AP Spanish class went to Spain. And then I loved Barcelona. Like, I fell in love with the city. My family and I still talk to this day, and that's 30 years ago. But you get hooked. You get hooked with the travel. You get hooked with the immersion of living in a different culture that's 100%, different from where you come from. Most of the time, the families that I stayed with, they only had one child. I never knew what it was like to be an only child. So that was fun. That was incentive enough. And then just catching the bug. Like, we have a beautiful country here. The US is amazing. It has a lot of great sites to see, museums, aquariums, taking a train ride, eating different foods. So that's what got me traveling.
Oh my goodness, I love it. And then how did your twin fare while you were away doing all of these things? Because a lot of times I have experienced twins where if one goes, the other one wants to be, really closely linked. How did you guys manage some of those separations?
So my twin went into the Army right out of high school. I'm sorry, right before he actually finished while he was in the Army. So he was already abroad. He lived in Italy for 30 years. And he traveled with the Army. He was in Germany. His kids speak Italian and German. We would meet. So I spent a couple of summers in Israel, working in Israel for companies that wanted to do better business here in the US. So I was sent to train them to, like, how to do digital marketing, how to work with particular companies. And we would meet at the Dead Sea. So I would meet my twin around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is such a rich experience. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what I used to say to my mom. And in fact, I was hoping that that would have been the situation for my son. I wanted to send him on a trek around the world when he graduated high school.
Yeah.
Instead, I sent him to New York. So he did do a semester at St. John's, but he was so homesick that he came back home. And I had to allow him to come back and kind of fall into what it is he loves. But he did continue to travel. So he does have that travel bug and that desire to see the world. So I'm still encouraging that. And that's
Oh,
why I'm
yeah.
build your business and let the world be your potential marketplace. Find opportunities where there are consumers, niche markets who are interested in what it is you have to offer and identify them, and they can be anywhere in the world. You
Yeah.
need to come in and understand the culture. And like you mentioned, that's exactly how I like to travel. I tend to like to go in and get off the beaten path. I don't like going to all the touristy. I really like to have
Yeah.
a lived experience whenever I'm in a particular community so that I can just get what does it feel like to live here every day? How do the locals travel and move around? Where do the locals eat?
Yeah.
Forget the tourist
That's a
stuff.
big part of it too. Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I think it's so fascinating. So it's great. You've used so many of these experiences and motivations and incorporating them into your business. So with your business, you're looking at matching people for opportunities. And my guess is that your lens is probably pretty globally focused.
So I'll tell you a little bit about Level. So the name of the company is called Level. Our URL is joinlevel.co. And basically what we are is a hiring and dating platform that also offers jobs. So the way that we see the company growing, and I do have a co-founder, is the second most question that you're asked when you meet someone new is, what do you do? So we basically turned that question on its head and made a platform. So now not only can you meet people that do what you do, but we also feel that there's a greater organic match between meeting someone in the industry that you're so proud of. I tend to connect with and date people in my industry because, one, they understand. So they understand digital marketing. They understand the internet. They have 17 email addresses like me. They have attended some of the conferences that I've been in, and they understand the language because, of course, every industry has its own special language. So I tend to be more attracted to people that are in my industry. So we basically came together. My co-founder is an actor, former football player. He had an app that helped with casting and people of POC to be casted in different commercials and television and film and TV work. But we said, let's add to that. So let's expand the industries that we're trying to get filled. So we work with 4 major industries: travel, finance, travel, finance, entertainment, and retail. And so we're only having jobs presented in those 4 categories. So when you upload your resume into Level, it creates a profile that looks like a resume. So your resume has all the key points that needs to be turned into a profile. So we help people write profiles using all the information from the resume. Now, we don't list your company, but we certainly list your experience. And we found that people are drawn to more to your experience and what you've already gone through, more so than saying my interest is long walks on the beach. You can only have so many long walks on the beach before you're like, okay. And then, of course, the best way to break, the awkwardness between two people is by talking about what you do. I'm very comfortable talking about my experience, my professional background, what I do best. It's what people identify with, it's what people feel close to. And we found that by matching people in your industry, it's a greater match, and the relationship is more organic.
That makes sense, because when I think about it, the only reason that I probably wouldn't have dated people in my immediate circle, because I was working with them and I didn't want to date people that I worked with per se. However, if I were to extend that arc a little bit larger, and there were other colleagues within the industry, you're right, it would be some compatibility there, right?
Yeah, and we're not sourcing from your job. So if you have an office that you go into, yes, I agree. Dating in office is very difficult, but dating in industry is very different. So when you create your profile using your resume, we don't pull any company information. It's a very safe environment, and it's only your experiences and key points so that you can make a greater match or a more organic match with someone that maybe have your same title, that may be in the same industry, but work in another department. So I tend to be a lot more interested in engineers and developers. Like, we can tech talk all day long, and we do, and we absolutely do. But if I tried to have that same conversation, and this is all hypotheses and if experimental, but I just know that I can't tech talk with everyone, because they're like, what about the long walk on the beach? And I'm like, what about that new computer that just came out? What about that new operating system? And it's a little bit different.
Oh, it's totally different. It's so funny because sometimes, so I was just talking to a colleague of mine who is advising our company as the interim CTO.
Mm-hmm.
And now here's a funny thing. So how we met, though, is we met on a dating platform. I
Nice.
met him on Tinder.
Nice. Of
What
course.
was so funny was he was the only one responding to me, but he was responding kind of about, some of my background. And he was like, it's, I was like, oh, and so when he said, he was first an industrial engineer, and then he trained himself to be a software engineer, and he was building a startup company. I was like, hey, you want to talk offline?
Yeah. Yeah, because I have a startup. I know exactly how this goes. And that's exactly what Level is about. It is about making those organic connections on things that are important to you. Now, I'm not saying long walks on the beach are not a great way to, break the ice or meet folks, but if we can't bring my computer to the beach, I don't think I'm doing it. Yeah. I mean, and as a founder and working on a startup, that is my long walk, right?
It's pretty much in the purse,
right? And whether you're creating a vision board or whiteboard, folks in this side of the industry, like you asked about manifestations. I whiteboard and vision board everything. I have a workflow that is how my day is going to be mapped out. So, I have 10 o'clock here. Here's my notes for my 10, my 11. And sometimes, honestly, like, those natural connections just aren't there unless someone goes, I know how to do workflows. I whiteboard everything as well. Like, it's just a little bit different.
It is. It's so interesting because Dr. Oliver and I are partners in ZenoVerse Wellness Group, and he's the functional medicine physician. But I remember when we were first kind of, getting to know one another, there were some commonalities. my mother had introduced me to Back to Eden as a kid. His mom had introduced him to Back to Eden as a kid. And you're right. I was like, I had not met anybody else who's, who had
Right.
that same fun fact. And then more
Right.
importantly, we're born in the same year. So, that other thing about kind of what happened in that year and that journey, it's like we kind of relate. You're on one coast, I'm on another coast, and then you also have the international element, but it's like I could kind of I could relate to those touch points. And there was a great kind of compatibility, as well as broader vision, that you're right, that we could build from. We were kind of talking and speaking the same things, but definitely coming from two different angles, me on the business and legal side, and him on the medical physician, the patient treatment protocol and care side. But we need each other,
Yeah.
in terms of what it is we're building together. So
We
definitely.
don't, and to your point, we're not trying to make an exact match.
Sure.
So you tend to say, if I'm a CEO, I have a greater opportunity to connect with someone on that same level.
Sure.
So the jobs within level, we have an actual section called the O suite, and you can only be a part of that both on the dating and matching side if you've previously had an O in your title.
Mm.
So we do say, for our O suite guests, our O suite members, here's all of the products and services. And it is a little different if you're maybe just doing like entry level, or maybe this is your second career. But it's a different conversation. It's a different commitment. It's a different audience that you need. So we're recognizing all of the differences based upon your professional background and your experience, and incorporating all of those elements into the website, both on the hiring and dating side.
Oh, that's so interesting. So what is it that you see when we kind of talk about, your forecast forward? A lot has definitely happened. And not only, I've watched over, I'd like to say, the last 4 decades of business, because I was really paying attention to business very, very early. So even before I was in high school, I was studying business shoots. In elementary, I was making
Right.
business
Yeah.
plans,
Yeah.
create vision boards. But more importantly, what I noticed the transition from the boomers generation. They were those that had corporate opportunities, corporate pensions, and all of that stuff. And then I'm part of Gen X, so we came into the first part of kind of the beginning part of more gig type economy opportunities, a little bit more entrepreneurial, but still it wasn't as popular as it's now emerged again. And then also post COVID, people realizing, thankfully, that technology allows a lot more flexibility in not only where you choose to live, but how you choose to engage in employment or
Mhm.
business opportunities. And I know along my journey over the last, few years, I spent a lot of time between Jamaica and London, and I met people. I remember meeting a couple that the wife worked in the tech space and was already working remotely. The husband didn't, but she helped him get a job so that then they could live, so many months in one place, so many months in another place. And they made a decision not to have kids. So they could kind of travel and live in different parts of the world and still conduct their business. So what are you kind of seeing and experiencing, and how does that also correlate to not only the business opportunities, but relationships?
Yeah. So I too am a nomad when it comes down to work. I can basically work anywhere, and I definitely have tested that boundaryless or borderless work environment. The company also was focused on remote only, so you can basically work wherever there's a internet connection. And as it relates to relationships, I think I've always dated long distance. And I don't know why. That's just part of, like, every single relationship has always been, I've lived in one place, he's lived in another. And because it's fun to visit, right? It's fun.
It is
Fun to
fun to
visit.
visit.
Back and
I
forth.
use that as a way to keep a little bit of control, but
Oh yeah, that part too, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. But again, like again, I go back to my childhood And I've lived with someone all my life, graduated from high school, did the exchange programs, went to college, lived with roommates, had my son in that relationship always. So now for me at this stage in my life, it's fun to be able to say, I'm gonna visit. We're gonna meet in a new city and we're gonna try different things. And then when it's over, it's like, okay, I'll drop you off at your terminal and I'm gonna get off at my terminal and I'll see you next time I see you. So again, that's not for everyone, but that's how I live my life. And it works for me. So, relationships are wherever you need them to be, number one. And number two, work is borderless. You can work anywhere. And especially if you make your own opportunities. So, I worked in tech for a long time. I worked remotely my whole career, 20 years, always remote. Always would go into an office if I had to. But again, I achieved a lot through Slack and email and Zoom meetings. So I've just been fortunate that way.
But does that make you a little bit distant in the connectivity in terms of the relationship? Because I notice and I won't do a deep dive in this, but what I have seen is even with the younger generations who also have kind of been more remote as opposed to being immersed in many corporate organizations and structures, that there's a downside. And some of that emotional connection has been showing up in terms of mental health, mental wellness, and some of that. And so, what is your observation or experience in kind of balancing those needs as well, or seeing how people are balancing those needs who have been more remote?
Yeah. When you start divvying up the audience into different age groups, there is definitely individual needs by age group. Gen Zers are more likely to need different perks if you're going to bring them into the office. I know in California, every office has a fully stocked kitchen. And that is simply because they'll come to work and they will literally eat 3 meals at work. If you look up like the Google campus or the Facebook campus or the LinkedIn campus, those are all companies that say you live where you work and you work where you live, which was perfect for our platform, right? So it's a little bit different, and we try to cater to each segment of that audience. Our core demographic is millennials and Gen Zers, simply because they are just entering that phase in their life where they're looking for connections and need the connection. And you're right, it's hard to make the connections in such a individualized screen world. You know what I mean? Like the younger generation, the millennials and Gen Zers, are more likely to FaceTime than actually meet. If you go to, I've been to certain clubs and they use social media. It's like, give me your DM. It's not about give me your phone number.
Right.
It's they will look up your entire background based upon your Instagram images.
Exactly.
So I mean, I've been to clubs, just hanging out with girlfriends or just checking out the scene or whatever, especially in San Francisco. And the guy was standing next to a girl and they were literally on their phones looking at each other's Instagram. And they were making decisions and assessments on what next steps would be based upon how those images looked. And I mean, I'm on social media a lot too. I'm a huge TikTok fan. I watch a lot of TikTok videos and it's addicting, but it is what's comfortable for them now. So every generation is different, and you do have to cater to that. We offer video chat within the app. So if you want to video chat, you can. You can't keep scanning folks or swiping on folks unless you text them first if you make a match. Like there's a lot of things that we have to do to accommodate the different generations and the differences between them.
Oh my goodness, this is so fascinating. I can't wait. We'll definitely have to host this some kind of fireside chat at one of our resorts. I think that'll be fun to do a live and virtual.
Let's do
A
it.
live and virtual conversation. Well, in terms of we're coming up on the tail end, and so just are there any last thoughts, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share that comes to mind around this conversation that I should include, or any last thoughts kind of around, mindset, motivations, or manifestations?
I would say keep planning. There's never a plan that is, mapped out forever. Learn how to make those pivots when you need to. Um,
Mm.
Stay healthy. Pivot from toxic people when you have to, regardless of whatever their relationship is to you. Um, and I would just say keep keep dreaming and keep fulfilling and keep manifesting, because life changes at every stage, and you want to make sure that you're leveling up all the time and that you're in a better position than what you were the year before. Solve your problems, talk to people, connect, and do something good for yourself all the time.
I love that. I part of the Naked with Dr. Money, the whole vlog came out of this idea of, sharing behind the scenes how I'm managing mind, body, and soul. And then because of the mental health crises, I started putting together a Naked with Dr. Money tour where we're going on a 20-city tour to help
Nice.
to provide tools around mental well-being. And the tour is called the Self-Love Tour.
Oh, I
Part
love.
one, self-love and healing through forgiveness. And so, really, you start with you. So start
Right.
with you, loving on you. That's where you begin, because it
Right.
all begins with you. And whatever
Amen.
you think the situation is, sometimes I've learned along the journey, sometimes the situation requires a different question. I don't
Hmm.
know if you ever have that moment where you feel like you're in communication with source or the higher power, or your whatever your beliefs are. But I found that when I've been frustrated about something, that it's, spirit is that you're asking the wrong question, change the
Mm-hmm.
questions, which is
Mm-hmm.
what, when you said pivot, we talk about pivoting in business. If the facts that you have don't work, but you have better facts over here, then you pivot to utilize those market opportunities and execute, and you win. It's the same
Yep.
thing along your personal journey, right? If you're not getting the answer to the question, perhaps you need to change the question.
That is amazing. I love that. That is exactly true. I put it in a different way, but that is 1000% true. But I also found, and I know that we're getting on time, is hurt people hurt people. So heal
Yes,
first. Heal first.
yes,
First
yes,
you. Heal first. And
yes,
then everything around you changes.
yes. Because I say when you healed, you hear differently. And I
Absolutely.
didn't go deep into the healing homes concept, but I
Nope.
definitely need to invite you into that conversation. Just in brief, what it is have you done the Course in Miracles?
I didn't. No.
Okay. So Source told me a couple years ago that I was going to finish the course, which I did, and then I'm going on my second trek through the course. So I
Okay.
finished the course, and then a cousin gifted me this mana planning, manuscripting journal, a 90-day journal. And as I
Yep.
began to look through both of those things recently, I thought they would lay a good foundation, a starting point to help people begin to reframe their life plans. And
Mm.
so I thought that not only would it be important in order to help heal from emotional trauma, it was clear that we want economic outcomes, but a lot of the impediments to full on, you know, realization or manifestation of those outcomes have a lot to do with emotional trauma that is preventative from going to the ultimate, level.
Yep.
So I came up with this understanding, this idea of, even before we start hosting the wellness weeks at our resorts, because we had already said that we would do November and December dates where families would come, maybe
Mhm.
for a family reunion or whatever, whatever. So we kicked it off by Zoom every Sunday where we meet for dinner. And
Oh,
so the goal is for families to meet virtually or live
I
and
love that.
share dinner as we're going through the course, and each person would kind of talk about where they are, in the process, and share any experiences. Because what I know is when you start doing the course, and it's a year-long course, you shifts will start to happen in your life, and it would be
Mhm.
great to have a community to kind of discuss this with, because
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
it's like, wait a second, did that just happen? Or am I tripping?
Those breakthroughs. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. I love
yes,
that.
yes. So
I
it's
need to
definitely,
do that. So it's called The Miracle? Is that what it?
it's called Healing Homes, which is healing our minds, emotions, and souls. And so I will send you an email invite. And again, it's optional, but in that I have the links to the material that we're using, so you could check
Okay.
it out and start your plan. And we're just telling everybody invite one. Let's see, let's be a big global study on how we could heal our families by helping people heal from emotional trauma and get themselves on the right course to live their desires right now. Live your heaven on earth right now.
I can invite 10.
All right. All right. All right. That sounds good. Well, Laura, as usual, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
I
Thank you
know.
so much for joining me today. I know we'll have an opportunity to continue this conversation, not only seeing you probably on my naked tour, but more importantly at the resort. And I
Let's
would
do it.
love to collaborate with you in something that you're doing with some of the entrepreneurs that you're mentoring.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
definitely let's have a circle back on that conversation.
Yeah, I'll
As
invite
well
you to
as
my
want to
Zooms.
recommend you to the Black Business Network as well. So we have all kind of follow up to do.
Okay. All right. I made some notes as well. So thank you so much for having me today. Always a great conversation with you. I'm pretty sure we'll be talking after this, but thank you so much for today. This was fun.
Wonderful. Take care.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, everyone, again, thank you so much for tuning in today for another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Laura James. I know I did. You see, we couldn't stop. And we definitely have more to share. Remember, if it's Wednesday and it's noon Pacific Daylight Time, it's time for Naked with Dr. Money, where we talk about mindsets, motivations, and manifestations. See you again next week. So take care. And remember, love you. All right. And I love you too. Bye.